Please don't hurt me, I can't walk, begged the Black Maid. Then the Single Billionaire Changed Everything. Who are you, and what happened to your legs? Elijah Donovan's voice cut through the thunder that rattled the windows of his mansion. The question wasn't cruel, it was sharp, full of disbelief, laced with a concern he didn't quite understand. The woman on his doorstep lay crumpled against the marble floor, her thin uniform soaked through from the rain. Her curls clung to her face, her lips trembling as she tried to form words. Lightning illuminated her features, dark skin, delicate yet fierce eyes, and a quiet terror that seemed older than the storm outside. I didn't mean to come here, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please don't hurt me, I can't walk. Elijah froze. For years, his home had been a place of silence and control, a kingdom of glass, steel, and order. He didn't let strangers inside, much less ones who looked as though they'd crawled through a nightmare to reach his door, but something in her plea cracked that fortress inside him. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. He crouched slowly beside her, careful not to startle her. You're safe, he said quietly. No one's going to hurt you. Her body trembled as he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her clothes clinging to his tailored suit. He carried her through the vast entryway of the Donovan estate, past portraits of his ancestors and silent corridors that hadn't known laughter in years. When he reached the guest lounge, he placed her gently on the couch. Rainwater pooled on the floor beneath her. He didn't care. The woman shivered violently. Her eyes darted around, wide and unsure, as though expecting someone to drag her away. Elijah poured her a glass of water and handed it to her. Drink. She hesitated before taking it, her hands shaking so much that a few drops spilled onto her wrist. She took a small sip, then another, her throat working painfully. What's your name? Elijah asked, his tone softer now. Maya, she said after a pause. Maya Hill. He studied her closely. You said you can't walk, what happened? Her gaze fell to her legs covered by the tattered hem of her uniform. An accident, a while ago, she swallowed hard. I used to walk fine until the fall. He frowned. And you're a maid? She nodded. I was hired this morning. I didn't think anyone lived here anymore. Elijah blinked. I own this house. Maya's eyes widened in horror. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. He raised a hand, stopping her panic before it spiraled. It's fine, you're clearly not well. He stood and went to the fireplace, striking a match. Flames sprang to life, washing the room in amber light. As warmth filled the space, Maya's shoulders sagged with exhaustion. He turned back toward her. You said you can't walk, yet you made it all the way up my driveway, half a mile long through this storm. How? Her lips quivered. I crawled. The fire crackled loudly in the silence that followed. Elijah stared at her, speechless. Rain pounded the windows, but all he could hear was that single word, crawled. Something twisted deep in his chest. He'd seen desperation before, but this was different. It wasn't the desperation of greed or ambition, it was survival. Maya tried to smile as though ashamed of her own confession. I didn't mean to cause trouble, I just needed somewhere dry. The agency told me the mansion was empty. The agency? He asked, walking closer. Yes, Silverline Domestic Services. They sent me here for a position. Elijah frowned. He hadn't hired anyone. In fact, he hadn't spoken to Silverline in years, not since he fired most of his staff after his mother's death. The mansion had been kept running by two old caretakers who rarely stayed overnight. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. They made a mistake, there was no request from me. Maya's face fell. Oh. He saw it then, the flicker of disappointment behind her composure. She tried to hide it, but her voice trembled. I'm sorry, I'll leave once the rain stops. Elijah's instinct was to agree, to send her away and restore his solitude. But as he looked at her, drenched, trembling, unable to walk, he knew he couldn't. Something about her presence felt like fate had shoved open a door he'd kept locked for too long. You're not going anywhere tonight, he said firmly. You need rest. Maya shook her head weakly. I don't want to be a burden. You already are, he said bluntly. Then, after a pause, his voice softened. But it's fine, I'll manage. For the first time, her lips curved into a faint, almost disbelieving smile. He went to call the house nurse, a retired woman who lived in the guest quarters, and instructed her to check Maya's condition. When he returned, Maya had drifted into an uneasy sleep by the fire. Her face, once tight with fear, now looked fragile, almost childlike. Elijah stood there for a long moment, watching her. He didn't know why he cared. He'd built his life on not caring about employees, about partners, about anyone who couldn't survive without help. Yet this stranger, this maid who could barely move, had unsettled everything. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows, falling across the couch where Maya lay. The nurse, Mrs. Kellen, had wrapped her legs in warm towels and placed a tray of soup beside her. Elijah stood by the window, coffee in hand, pretending to read the newspaper while his eyes betrayed him, flicking toward Maya every few seconds. "Her muscles are weak," Mrs. Kellen said quietly. "Looks like nerve damage from an old injury. She'll need therapy." Elijah nodded. "Can she recover?" "With patience, yes," the nurse said, "but it won't be easy." After she left, Maya stirred, blinking against the light. Her gaze met Elijah's, uncertain. "You stayed," she said softly. "I live here," he replied dryly. She smiled faintly. "I meant you didn't send me away." Elijah said nothing. He wasn't used to being thanked for decency. "You should eat," he said instead, nodding toward the soup. As she reached for the spoon, her hand shook. Without thinking, Elijah knelt beside her and steadied her wrist. Her skin was cold. Their eyes met and something flickered, unspoken, fragile, real. "Why did you come here, Maya?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because I needed work. I can't afford therapy or rent anymore. My landlord threw me out last week." "And you thought crawling up a stranger's driveway was the answer?" His tone was sharper than he intended. Her eyes glistened. "I didn't know where else to go. The agency promised this was my last chance." Her honesty disarmed him. He sighed, standing up. "Eat your soup." Maya obeyed quietly, though her gaze followed him as he paced the room. Every movement of hers seemed cautious, as if afraid he'd change his mind and cast her out. When she finished eating, Elijah turned back to her. "You can stay here for a while. I'll call the agency and figure out what went wrong." Her lips parted. "Stay here. Just until you recover," he clarified. "Don't make this into something it is." But inside, even he wasn't sure what this was. Later that evening, Elijah found himself in his study, staring out at the rain-soaked garden. His reflection in the glass looked older, lonelier than he remembered. The house, once a symbol of success, now felt like a cage filled with echoes of his past. His late mother's piano sat untouched in the corner. She'd always said his heart was too guarded, that one day it would cost him more than money ever could. He wondered if this broken woman on his couch was what she meant. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Maya in the doorway, supported by a cane Mrs. Kellen must have given her. She looked fragile but determined, her eyes searching the room like it held ghosts. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for not leaving me outside." Elijah leaned back against his desk, crossing his arms. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough," she said, her voice stronger now. "If I'm staying here, I want to earn it. I can help with laundry, cleaning, whatever you need." He almost smiled at her stubbornness. "You can't even stand for 5 minutes. "Then I'll start small," she replied. "Folding clothes doesn't require legs." There was something in her tone, humility wrapped in defiance, that stirred him again. She wasn't here for sympathy. She wanted dignity. "Fine," he said finally. "We'll talk about it when you're stronger." Maya nodded, her lips curving slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan." As she turned to leave, Elijah's voice stopped her. "Maya." She looked back. "That night when you said, 'Please don't hurt me,' who were you talking about?" The question lingered in the air like the last note of a sad song. Maya's hand tightened around her cane, her eyes clouded with pain. "Someone who already did," she said softly, then she turned and limped away. Elijah stood motionless, his chest heavy. The storm outside had ended, but another had just begun inside him. And for the first time in years, Elijah Donovan didn't want the silence back. The mansion breathed quietly that morning, the kind of stillness that only follows a storm. Light filtered through the tall windows, stretching across the marble floor in soft gold lines. Maya sat in the guest lounge, the faint hum of the fire whispering in the distance. Every crackle felt like a heartbeat in the emptiness. Her legs were wrapped in bandages and thick blankets, but the ache beneath them was bone deep, the kind that no warmth could fully reach. She shifted slightly, wincing. Each small movement was a reminder of what she'd lost and what she refused to speak of. Elijah's footsteps echoed before she saw him. He entered quietly, the crisp scent of coffee trailing behind. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his expression unreadable as he set a tray on the table. Breakfast, simple but neat. "You didn't have to," Maya murmured. "I didn't," Elijah replied. Mrs. Kellen insisted. He didn't meet her eyes as he poured coffee into 2 porcelain cups. He'd never been good at gentleness, it always came out too sharp, too careful. Yet when he finally turned toward her, the hard lines of his face softened. "You slept through most of yesterday," he said, your body still in shock. She nodded faintly, brushing a loose curl from her face. "I suppose it's better than the rain." He allowed himself a small smile. That's one way to see it. They fell into silence, awkward, tentative, but not cold. Elijah sipped his coffee, pretending to read a report he wasn't really seeing. Maya stared into her bowl of oatmeal, stirring absently, lost in a place far from the warmth of the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "You said you'd call the agency." "I did," he replied, setting his cup down. "Silverline had no record of sending anyone here. Your file doesn't exist in their system." Her spoon froze mid-stir. "What?" "They said there's no Maya Hill listed with your injury or credentials. Whoever sent you here, it wasn't them." The color drained from her face. "That can't be right. I spoke to someone, a woman named Claudine. She sent me the address, the papers." Elijah's gaze narrowed slightly. "Do you still have those papers?" Maya's lips parted, but no words came. She looked toward her bag, the small, soaked leather satchel she'd carried in the night before. It sat by the fireplace, drying by the flames. Slowly, she gestured toward it. Elijah retrieved the bag and handed it to her. Inside were a few clothes, a broken phone, and a folded letter with Silverline's logo. He scanned it carefully. "This looks legitimate," he said finally, "but the signature's fake." Maya's hands shook. "Then who sent me here?" "That's what I'd like to know." The words hung between them, heavy and uncertain. Elijah leaned back, studying her. There was something in the way she spoke, measured, cautious, like someone used to hiding pieces of herself. He wanted to ask more, but he didn't, not yet. By afternoon, the rain had cleared completely. The garden beyond the glass walls shimmered with dew. Elijah's staff moved quietly through the hallways, Mrs. Kellen tending to laundry, the gardener humming softly outside. The mansion felt alive again, though in truth it hadn't been for years. Elijah found Maya by the window, her cane propped against the chair. She was tracing her finger absently across the fogged glass, watching the gardener work. "You're supposed to be resting," he said from behind her. "I am," she replied with a faint smile. "Resting my legs, not my eyes." Her tone was lighter than before, though he caught the edge of sadness in it. He stepped closer, his reflection joining hers in the window pane. "Mrs. Kellen says your injuries are from a fall." Maya's hand stilled on the glass. "Yes." "How long ago?" She hesitated. "Almost a year." He waited. She didn't say more. "Maya," he said quietly, "I'm not asking to pry, but if someone hurt you." "No one hurt me," she cut in quickly, too quickly, her jaw tightened. "It was an accident." Her eyes remained fixed outside, her voice trembling beneath the calm. Elijah wanted to believe her, but he'd spent too many years reading people, business partners, lawyers, men who lied for money. Maya wasn't lying for gain, she was lying to survive. "All right," he said finally, stepping back. "If you ever want to talk about it, you can." She didn't answer, but her reflection flickered in the glass, a brief, grateful glance she tried to hide. That evening, Elijah worked in his study. The sound of typing filled the air, the click of keys blending with the rain still dripping from the gutters outside. He'd thought work would distract him, but his thoughts kept circling back to the woman down the hall. Her voice, her silence, her eyes, everything about her unsettled his peace. Around 9. He heard a faint sound, a crash. He rose instantly and strode down the corridor. The sound had come from the guest lounge. When he pushed open the door, he found Maya on the floor beside the couch, her cane toppled over. She looked up, startled and embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I was trying to reach the lamp." He crossed the room in seconds, kneeling beside her. "You should have called Mrs. Kellen." "I didn't want to bother her, I thought I could stand for a minute." Her breath came in shallow bursts, the pain written across her face. Elijah's hand went instinctively to her arm. "You need to stop pushing yourself." "I can't just sit here all day," she whispered. "If I stop trying, I'll never walk again." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time he heard the fear behind her determination. He hesitated, then lifted her gently back to the couch. His hands brushed against her shoulder, the heat of her skin startling against his cold fingertips. "Then we'll try differently," he said. "Therapy, not strain." Her eyes widened slightly. "Therapy, that's expensive." "I can afford it." "I can't let you." "It's not a debate," he said firmly. "Consider it part of your employment." Her lips parted. "You mean you're keeping me on?" He nodded once. "You can help where you can. In return, you'll recover properly." For a long moment she just stared at him, her eyes shimmering with something he couldn't name. Gratitude maybe, or disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. He stood abruptly, almost uncomfortable with the warmth her words stirred in him. "Rest now, we'll start tomorrow." The next day, sunlight filled the house again. Mrs. Kellen prepared a small breakfast in the conservatory and Maya joined her, slowly, carefully, balancing on her cane. Elijah watched from the doorway, unnoticed. There was something quietly powerful about her perseverance. When he entered, she greeted him with a smile, shy but genuine. "Morning." "Morning," he replied, taking a seat opposite her. "You seem stronger." "A little," she said. "Mrs. Kellen showed me stretches. I'm learning balance again." He nodded approvingly. "That's good." They ate in silence for a while before Elijah set down his fork. "I have something to ask." Maya's brow furrowed slightly. "That night," he continued slowly, "you said someone already hurt you. I need to know what that means." The room seemed to still. Even the morning light dimmed against the sudden heaviness of her silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "I was working for a family in Chicago, the Harcourts. They owned several estates, one of which was under renovation. I fell there, or at least that's what they told people." His gaze sharpened. "What do you mean?" "I was cleaning the upper floor when one of their sons cornered me. He was drunk. I tried to get away. He pushed me. I fell 2 flights of stairs." Elijah's jaw tightened. "I woke up in a hospital," she went on. "They said I'd tripped. The Harcourts paid for my treatment, but only to silence me. When I tried to press charges, I started getting calls, threats. My file disappeared from Silverline the next week." Her voice wavered, but her eyes stayed steady. "After that, no one would hire me, so I left the city." The words fell like stones into the quiet. Elijah sat back, his chest tight. Anger simmered beneath the calm mask he wore. Does this man still work for them? "Yes, and his family still owns half of Chicago." She gave a faint, bitter smile. "No one cares what happens to a maid." Elijah looked at her then, not as a stranger, not even as someone broken, but as someone fighting to live in a world that had turned cruel. "You're wrong," he said softly. "Someone does." She blinked, caught off guard by the conviction in his tone. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them pulsed with quiet understanding, fragile but real. Then Elijah rose, straightening his jacket. "I'll have my assistant look into the Harcourts." "You don't have to," she said quickly. "I know," his eyes met hers, "but I will." That night, after she'd gone to bed, Elijah stood alone in his study again. The rain had started once more, tapping gently against the windows. He poured himself a drink, but the firelight caught his reflection in the glass, a man haunted, searching for something he didn't yet understand. Somewhere down the hall, Maya shifted in her sleep, murmuring softly. He thought about her strength, her quiet defiance, and the way she'd crawled through a storm just to survive. For the first time in years, Elijah Donovan felt something stir that wasn't loneliness, it was purpose. And somewhere deep within the silence of that mansion, 2 broken lives had begun to heal, though neither yet knew what storms still waited beyond the calm. The morning sun rose lazily over the Donovan estate, painting long streaks of gold across the misty hills. The storm had passed, but inside the mansion, the air still felt heavy, like the echo of something unspoken. Elijah Donovan stood at his study window, staring at the gardens below. Maya was outside with Mrs. Kellen, moving slowly between the flower beds, her cane pressing into the damp soil. Each step looked painful, but her determination was relentless. Something about that quiet strength stirred an ache deep within him, one he had buried long ago. He closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling sharply. It had been 3 years since Isabella died. Her laughter still haunted these halls, a ghost that lived in the faint scent of lilies and the music she used to play in the piano room. They had been engaged, a wedding planned, a life waiting to unfold. But then came the accident, the crash, the phone call that shattered everything he was. He remembered how he'd stood in the rain that night, staring at the twisted wreck of her car, hearing the police officer's voice blur into static. "She didn't make it, sir." Since then, Elijah had built walls around himself higher than the mansion's gates. He buried his grief in work, in silence, in the perfection of order. No one was allowed close, no one could be. Until Maya. He didn't understand it, the way she could sit in a room and make the silence feel softer. The way her eyes, even wounded, carried the kind of light he hadn't seen in years. He told himself it was pity, compassion, responsibility, but every time she smiled, it chipped away at the armor he'd spent years forging. He turned from the window abruptly, heading to his desk. The phone buzzed. It was his assistant, Ethan. "Elijah, I found something," came the voice on the other end, "about the Harcourt family." Elijah's grip on the phone tightened. "Go on." Publicly, their son Damien Harcourt was never charged for any assault case, but there were sealed reports, hushed settlements. One matches the timeline Maya mentioned. It was buried fast with the help of the Harcourt's legal team. A long pause followed. Elijah's voice dropped an octave. "Send me everything." "I already did," Ethan said, "but Elijah, be careful. Going against the Harcourts means going against half the city's power brokers." Elijah's gaze drifted toward the window again, where Maya was struggling to lift a watering can with one hand. "Then we'll start small," he said quietly. "No one buries truth forever." He hung up, his reflection caught in the glass, a man torn between vengeance and redemption. By afternoon, the sky turned pale gray again and the house fell into its usual hush. Elijah found himself in the piano room, drawn there by habit. The grand piano gleamed like a ghost of memory. His fingers brushed the keys, tentative, remembering the last melody Isabella had played, a slow, mournful sonata. He pressed a single note, then another. The sound wove through the hallways like a whisper. Maya, resting in the conservatory, lifted her head. The melody was haunting, filled with a sadness that seemed almost tangible. Without thinking, she followed the sound, her cane tapping lightly against the polished floor. When she reached the piano room, she stopped by the doorway. Elijah was there, eyes closed, lost in the music. It was the first time she'd seen him without that composed, guarded expression. "You play beautifully," she said softly. Elijah turned, startled. "I didn't hear you come in." "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, her voice gentle. "It just sounded lonely." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "That's fitting." She stepped closer, her cane tapping lightly. "What piece is that?" "Elegy," he replied. "Rachmaninoff. Isabella used to play it." The name slipped out before he could stop it. A shadow crossed his face. Maya noticed. "Isabella." He looked down at the keys. "My fiancée, she died 3 years ago, car accident." Silence followed. Maya's hand tightened on her cane. "I'm sorry." Elijah nodded once, his voice quiet. "I stopped playing after that. Music made the house feel too alive, and I was." Maya studied him, the sharp suit, the stoic expression, the sadness beneath his eyes. For all his wealth and power, he looked breakable. "You know," she said softly, "grief doesn't leave because we silence it, it just waits." He met her gaze, something flickering in his eyes. "You sound like you know." "I do." She looked down at her bandaged legs. "Pain changes people, but sometimes it teaches us how to start again." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two wounded souls in a quiet room filled with ghosts. Elijah's voice broke the silence. "Would you like to learn?" Maya blinked. "Learn what?" He gestured toward the piano. "To play." Her lips parted, surprise flashing across her face. I wouldn't even know where to start." He smiled faintly. "Neither did I." He moved aside, leaving space on the bench. For a moment, she hesitated, then slowly sat beside him. The warmth of his presence sent a quiet shiver through her. "Press this key," he said, guiding her hand. "Now this one, feel how they connect." The notes rang soft and hesitant at first, then steadier. Maya laughed under her breath, a sound light and fragile. That was terrible, she said. It was perfect, he replied. Their eyes met briefly, unexpectedly, and something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. That evening, dinner was quiet. Mrs. Kellen had set the table in the dining room, but Elijah barely touched his food. His mind kept drifting to the sound of Maya's laugh, to the way her fingers had trembled on the piano keys. Across the table, Maya noticed his distance. "You're thinking about her again," she said softly. He glanced up, surprised. "How do you know?" "Your eyes," she said simply. "They look like mine when I remember things I wish I could forget." He set down his fork, leaning back. "You're very observant." "It's a habit," she said, smiling faintly. "People notice maids less when they're quiet. You learn to read everything else instead." Something in her tone made him ache. "You shouldn't have had to learn that," he murmured. Maya lowered her gaze. "We don't always get to choose the lessons life gives us." He wanted to tell her that she deserved better, that no one should have to fight so hard just to be seen, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he reached for his glass, trying to drown the growing warmth in his chest. After dinner, as she rose to leave, she swayed slightly. He stood quickly, steadying her arm. Their eyes met, too close, too sudden. "Careful," he said quietly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're trembling." He stepped back instantly, breaking the contact. "I'm fine." But he was. Later that night, Elijah sat in his study again, the firelight flickering against his face. On his desk lay the Harcourt files Ethan had sent. Each page detailed cover-ups, payouts, and silenced complaints. Maya's story was there, between the lines, buried under signatures and lies. He stared at the papers until the letters blurred. He, once sworn never to feel again, feelings made men weak. But now, seeing her name tied to pain and injustice, something inside him burned. He picked up his phone. "Ethan," he said, his voice hard. "I want everything you can find on Damien Harcourt, business deals, political ties, vulnerabilities, discreetly." "Understood," Ethan replied. When he hung up, Elijah leaned back, staring into the fire. "You don't get to bury her story," he murmured. The next morning, Maya found him in the garden. He was tending to a rose bush, pruning it with careful precision. "I didn't expect to find you out here," she said, smiling softly. He glanced up. "It's peaceful." "Mrs. Kellen says you planted these after," she hesitated, unsure how to finish. "After Isabella," he said quietly. "They were her favorite." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was gentle, shared. "Do you ever stop missing her?" Maya asked. Elijah's jaw tightened. "No, you just learn to live beside the emptiness." She nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why we're both still here, trying to live beside it." He looked at her, then really looked at the faint scars on her hands, the quiet fire in her eyes. "You're stronger than you think, Maya." "So are you," she replied. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm not sure about that." "Then maybe," she said softly, "we'll figure it out together." For the first time in years, Elijah felt the ice around his heart begin to crack, not shattered but softening. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew that something had begun to change in the Donovan mansion. Not just healing. Hope. The first light of dawn crept through the Donovan estate, soft and golden. The world outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that held promise. In the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon and brewed coffee mingled in the air. Mrs. Kellen hummed as she worked, her gentle tune blending with the crackle of the stove. By the doorway, Maya balanced on her cane, carefully folding napkins for the breakfast table. Her movements were slow but deliberate, her injured legs trembling slightly with effort. Every motion cost her something, but she refused to show it. Mrs. Kellen turned, catching sight of her. "Child, you should be resting those legs, you've done enough." Maya smiled softly. "Resting won't make me stronger, Mrs. Kellen." The older woman sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "You've got a heart too big for your own good." "I just need to feel useful," Maya replied, her gaze dropping to the napkins. "After what happened, I can't go back to who I was, but maybe I can still become someone better." Mrs. Kellen reached over, patting her hand. "You already are, dear, more than you realize." Maya's smile faltered slightly. Compliments still felt foreign to her, a language she wasn't sure she deserved to speak. Later that morning, Elijah found them in the dining hall. He paused by the doorway, unseen for a moment. Maya was setting the table, leaning carefully on her cane, moving from one corner to another. Her face was set in quiet determination. There was something about watching her that unsettled him, something deeply human. She wasn't supposed to be here, he reminded himself. She wasn't supposed to matter this much. Yet every day her presence seemed to fill the hollow spaces Isabella's death had left behind. Maya, he said finally. She turned quickly, startled but smiling when she saw him. Good morning, Mr. Donovan. Elijah, he corrected gently. Her cheeks warmed. Right, good morning, Elijah. He stepped into the room, adjusting his cufflinks out of habit. You're working too much. So I've been told, she replied with a faint grin. He arched a brow. And you're not listening. Not entirely, she admitted. Work helps me think less. He studied her for a moment. And what happens when you stop thinking? Her eyes flickered toward the window. Then I start remembering. Elijah didn't press further, he simply nodded. Come to the conservatory when you're done, I want to show you something. An hour later, Maya made her way to the glass-walled conservatory. The room was bathed in sunlight, filled with the scent of roses and lemon balm. Elijah stood near the far end, beside a small bench and a folded newspaper. He looked up as she entered. Good, you made it. Wasn't sure if it was an order or an invitation, she said lightly. Let's call it both, he replied, smiling faintly. Sit. She obeyed, lowering herself slowly onto the bench. Elijah poured 2 glasses of juice and handed her one. Mrs. Kellen says you've been helping with the household accounts. I used to manage inventory back in Chicago, she said. I figured I could do the same here. He looked impressed. She also mentioned you caught a mistake in the supplier receipts last week. Maya shrugged modestly. Just noticed the numbers didn't add up. You saved us $5,000. Her eyes widened. I did. He nodded. You did. For a moment she just stared at him, then laughed softly. Guess I'm worth keeping after all. His smile deepened. You always were. The days that followed fell into a quiet rhythm. Mornings were for work, afternoons for therapy. Elijah had arranged for a physical therapist to visit 3 times a week, though Maya often insisted on doing extra exercises between sessions. He would sometimes find her by the hallway railing, trying to stand without her cane. Her legs trembled, her breath caught, but she never gave up. One afternoon, he approached her quietly as she steadied herself. You're going to wear yourself out. She shot him a playful glare. I've survived worse. I don't doubt it, he said, but maybe try not to add to the list. Maya smiled, leaning against the wall. You really don't like seeing people push themselves, do you? He folded his arms. Only when they remind me of me. Her expression softened. Is that what you do, push until it hurts? He hesitated, meeting her gaze. Used to, now I just work until it's quiet enough to forget. Her voice lowered. And does it ever get quiet? He didn't answer, he didn't need to. That evening, the estate glowed with amber light. The staff dined early, laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen. For the first time, Maya joined them. She sat between Mrs. Kellen and the gardener, Daniel, a kind man with rough hands and a gentle heart. You're fitting in well, Daniel said with a grin. The boss hasn't scared you off yet. Maya chuckled. Not yet, he's not as terrifying as he pretends to be. You'd be surprised, Mrs. Kellen teased. He's been different since you arrived, softer. Maya blushed slightly. I doubt that's true. But deep down, she'd noticed it too, the way Elijah lingered in conversation, the way his tone warmed when he spoke to her. For years, the staff had called him the ghost of Donovan Hall. Now, that ghost seemed to be waking. Yet even peace can tremble beneath the surface of danger. That night, while everyone slept, headlights flared across the distant gates of the estate. A black SUV paused, its engine humming low. From inside, a man stepped out, tall, lean, his suit too expensive for subtlety. He pulled a phone from his pocket, dialing a number. She's here, he said. His voice was smooth, cold. At Donovan's place, what do you want me to do? A pause, then the reply crackled through the speaker. Wait, we'll handle her soon. The man glanced toward the dark silhouette of the mansion. Understood. He got back into the car and drove off into the night. The next morning, the world went on as if nothing had changed. Maya woke early, her muscles aching pleasantly from the previous day's therapy. She moved through the quiet hallways, feeling stronger, lighter, even. The storm outside her life seemed to be finally calming. When she entered the library, she found Elijah asleep at his desk, his head resting on his arm beside a pile of documents. The morning sun fell across his face, softening his features. For the first time, he looked peaceful. She hesitated at the doorway, then smiled faintly and draped a blanket over his shoulders. "Thank you," he murmured sleepily, eyes half open. She froze. "I didn't mean to wake you." He straightened, adjusting the blanket. "You didn't," he paused, studying her. "You're walking better." "Some days are good," she said, "some aren't." He nodded. "That's life, I suppose." Their eyes met briefly, and the silence between them felt different, warmer, charged. "Would you join me for breakfast?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "Breakfast? Mrs. Kellen made something new. I'd rather not eat alone." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right." Over breakfast, the conversation flowed easily. They spoke of ordinary things, books, music, how Maya once dreamed of teaching children before life took a different turn. Elijah listened intently, every word sinking deeper into him. "You should still do that," he said finally. "Teach, I mean." Maya laughed softly. "With what money, what school would take a half-broken maid?" His expression darkened. "Don't call yourself that." Her smile faded. "It's true." "No," he said firmly, "you're the strongest person I've ever met, don't diminish that." His voice carried a quiet intensity that made her heart stutter. "Thank you," she whispered. For a long time, they simply sat there, the clink of cutlery the only sound in the room. As days turned into weeks, change rippled quietly through the mansion. The staff laughed more, the garden flourished again, and Elijah, once a man of silence, began to live again. Maya's presence was like sunlight through cracked glass. She filled the emptiness without trying. But peace, as always, is fragile. One evening, while cleaning the study, Maya found a brown envelope slipped under the door. She frowned, glancing around. It wasn't marked with a name, only a single word scrawled in ink: "Run." Her heart stilled. Inside were photographs, blurry, taken from a distance. Her walking with her cane, her entering the estate gates, a close-up of her face through a window. And on the last page, a single line written in neat, cruel handwriting. "You should have stayed gone." The envelope slipped from her trembling hands. "Maya," Elijah's voice broke through the panic. He just entered holding a folder. "What's wrong?" She spun around, trying to hide the papers, but he saw the fear in her eyes before she could speak. He strode forward, grabbing the envelope gently but firmly. As he read, his expression hardened. "Who sent this?" he demanded. Her voice shook. "I don't know, but I think it's them, the Harcourts." He exhaled slowly, anger simmering beneath his calm. "They found you." Maya nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought I was safe here." "You are," he said firmly. "No one's touching you again." "Elijah, please," she whispered. "You don't understand what they can do." "I understand perfectly," he cut in, his tone fierce but steady. "And I'm not letting fear decide what happens next." He turned toward his desk, picking up his phone. "I'll call security, we'll tighten surveillance, and I'll deal with whoever sent this." Maya stepped forward, her hand trembling as it touched his arm. "Why are you doing this for me?" He met her gaze, his voice quiet but unshakable. "Because you refused to break when life tried to destroy you, and I won't let them try again." For a moment, the world stilled around them. The air between them pulsed with something raw, fear, resolve, and something deeper neither dared to name. Outside, the wind howled through the garden, carrying the first signs of another storm. Inside, two hearts, both once broken, stood on the edge of something neither could have foreseen. But as Elijah Donovan tightened his grip on the envelope, one truth burned clear through the growing shadows. The maid who refused to break had awakened the man who could no longer stay numb. And this time, the storm would have to go through both of them. The Donovan estate had settled into an uneasy quiet after the storm outside and the one that had stirred within its walls. Yet even in the calm, a storm of another kind was approaching, one that carried the shadows of Chicago, of promises broken and pain buried too deep to stay hidden. Maya woke that morning to the first rays of sunlight spilling through her bedroom window, warming her face. She stretched carefully, testing her legs. The therapy and daily exercises had strengthened her, though every movement still reminded her of the past she longed to leave behind. She had almost convinced herself that she was safe, that Elijah's walls around the estate were high enough, his wealth a shield strong enough to keep the Harcourts from touching her again. She was wrong. It started with a sound, faint, distant, almost imperceptible. A click of heels on stone, a door opening and closing somewhere far away. Maya froze, every nerve on edge. The sensation was familiar, one she hadn't felt since the night she fell. Her chest tightened, memories she had carefully stacked behind steel doors threatening to spill over. Damien Harcourt, the man who had shattered her life. She shook her head, trying to breathe normally. "It's fine, it's safe here," she whispered to herself, though her voice trembled. Elijah entered the room at that moment, his presence quiet but commanding. He had already noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched her blanket. "You're awake early," he said, stepping closer. "I heard something," she admitted, forcing a small, nervous smile. "Probably just the wind." He frowned, scanning the room. "Maya." "I'm fine," she interrupted quickly. "Really?" Elijah didn't press, though he could feel the storm behind her eyes. He had learned enough about her to know that some fears could not be dismissed with words. By mid-morning, Maya was moving through the halls with her cane, determined to distract herself with small chores. She cleaned windows, dusted shelves, and organized supplies in the conservatory. The work gave her a rhythm, a fragile sense of control over a life that had been stolen from her. Elijah watched her from a distance. He had instructed the security team to monitor the perimeter closely after the threatening envelope arrived, but he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that danger was closer than anyone knew. There was something about the way she moved, quiet, deliberate, but always careful, that reminded him that she had survived more than he could imagine. And every time he looked at her, he remembered Isabella, the woman he had lost, and how quickly life could take someone away. He approached her cautiously. "You've been working too hard," he said softly. Maya looked up, smiling faintly. "I feel stronger when I do. I can't just sit and wait for the past to find me." Elijah's jaw tightened. "It will find you regardless if you don't stay alert." Her eyes flickered. "I know." He nodded, though he sensed the weight behind her words. She was telling him she had survived before and she would survive again, but he couldn't ignore the shadows creeping closer. The first encounter came in the garden. Maya was pruning a small rose bush when a voice cut through the morning calm. "Hello, Maya." Her body stiffened instantly. She froze mid-prune, her hand trembling around the shears. The voice was smooth, familiar, the sound of nightmares replayed in reality. She turned slowly. Damien Harcourt stood at the edge of the garden, his tailored suit incongruous against the morning dew. His smirk was the same one she had remembered, the arrogance of a man who believed he could take anything, hurt anyone, and walk away unscathed. Her breath caught. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, voice trembling. "I came to see if my memory serves me correctly," he said, stepping closer, the faint click of his shoes on the stone path echoing ominously. "It does, Maya Hill, the maid who slipped through our fingers." "You're insane," she said sharply, trying to mask the fear crawling through her veins. "I prefer thorough," he replied smoothly, "and persistent." Maya backed away, her cane slipping slightly in the wet grass. "You have no right to." Before she could finish, Elijah emerged from the shadows of the conservatory. His presence was sudden, silent, but commanding. Damien froze when he saw him. "Elijah Donovan," he said cautiously, "I didn't expect to find you here." Elijah's gaze narrowed, his hands tightening at his sides. "You should leave." Damien's smirk faltered slightly. Protecting her now, how touching. Maya's chest heaved, she clutched her cane, trying to steady herself. "Stay back," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Elijah stepped forward, placing himself between Damien and Maya. "I said leave." The air between the three was thick, the morning calm shattered by tension and old wounds. Damien's eyes flicked to Maya, and for a split second, recognition and a trace of guilt crossed his face. Then it vanished. "I'm just here to talk," he said smoothly. "Talk from a distance," Elijah said coldly, "or I'll make sure you regret being here." Damien chuckled lightly. "You're serious? Good, I like that." Elijah didn't respond. His attention was on Maya. You okay? He asked quietly. Maya nodded though her hands shook. I'm fine. Elijah's gaze returned to Damien. You're done, step off this property. Damien's smirk returned. We'll see, the past has a way of catching up. With that, he turned, leaving as quietly as he had come, but the warning lingered like a shadow at the edge of her life. Inside the estate, Elijah shut the doors and windows, signaling security to tighten the perimeter. He watched Maya carefully, noting the tension in her shoulders, the pale fear on her face. You're not safe here, he said quietly, sitting across from her in the conservatory. I know, she replied. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled as they traced the edge of her cane. But I'm not running anymore, I can't. He studied her, feeling the familiar ache in his chest, the same one he had felt when Isabella died. Protecting her wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about something deeper, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel for years: attachment. You can't fight him alone, he said firmly. I won't, she said, but I have to stand. I can't let him. Her voice broke slightly. I won't let him win. Elijah nodded slowly. Then we fight together. That night, Elijah worked through the Harcourt files, cross-referencing old lawsuits, settlements, and property records. Every thread he pulled revealed more of their corruption: bribes, threats, silenced workers, hidden surveillance. Damien's arrogance had made him sloppy. For the first time, Elijah felt the stirrings of hope, not just for Maya, but for justice. Meanwhile, Maya sat quietly in her room, replaying the garden encounter. Every memory of the fall, the fear, the helplessness threatened to overwhelm her. But she gripped her cane, forcing herself to breathe, to remember that she wasn't alone. Elijah had not only shielded her from harm, but had placed himself squarely in her corner. That realization gave her a strength she hadn't felt in years. Days passed, each marked by cautious vigilance. Damien's shadow lingered just out of reach, a constant reminder of the danger still at their doorstep. Yet in the midst of the tension, an unexpected bond deepened between Elijah and Maya. They worked together quietly, planning her recovery, strategizing against the Harcourts, and sharing small moments that had nothing to do with fear. One afternoon, while reviewing documents in the library, Maya glanced at Elijah. You never talk about Isabella much, she said softly. He paused, looking down at the papers. There's not much to say. She's gone, and I built walls to survive it. But you don't have to survive alone, she said gently. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared pain, of survival, and of something fragile yet undeniable: trust. For the first time in years, Elijah allowed himself to imagine a life where grief didn't have to be carried alone. And for the first time since her fall, Maya imagined a future where the past didn't define her. Then came the call. A private number flashed across Elijah's phone. He answered cautiously. Mr. Donovan, the voice was low, threatening. We know where she is, leave it alone or she'll pay. Elijah's jaw tightened. You've already crossed the line. I'll make sure the law and I deal with you. The line went dead, leaving a heavy silence. Elijah's gaze flicked to Maya, who had entered the room unnoticed. They know, he said softly. Maya's hands clenched into fists, then let them try. He took a deep breath, placing a hand over hers. No, I won't let them. Her eyes met his, fear mingled with gratitude. Why are you doing this for me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned closer. Because you deserve someone who doesn't walk away, and this time I won't. Her breath caught. For the first time, the past didn't feel as heavy, not when he stood beside her, not when she realized she had someone willing to fight for her. Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling the trees. Shadows from Chicago were closing in, but inside, in the warmth of the Donovan estate, two hearts prepared to face the storm together. Elijah Donovan's decision was clear. He would not walk away, not from Maya, not from the past that had haunted her, and not from the man who had caused so much pain. The fight had begun. The Donovan estate had never been quieter, and yet the air carried a tension that no storm could explain. Elijah Donovan sat in his study, fingers drumming against the polished mahogany desk. Files, contracts, and reports were scattered before him, but his mind wasn't on business. Maya. Even after weeks together, after watching her struggle and fight through her pain, after seeing the quiet courage she carried like armor, Elijah couldn't shake the effect she had on him. Her resilience, her warmth, her subtle defiance, it stirred something long buried within him. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Maya," Mrs. Kellen's voice floated through the doorway. "She asked me to check if you'd be joining her for lunch." Elijah nodded absently. "Tell her yes in 20 minutes. As the footsteps receded, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. He hadn't expected to feel this way, hadn't allowed himself to feel, not since Isabella's death. And now, every glance from Maya, every quiet smile, every faint tremor of her hand made his chest tighten with something he wasn't prepared to name. By noon, Maya entered the study, cane in hand, but moving with more confidence than she had a month ago. She carried a stack of papers, carefully balancing them as she approached his desk. "Elijah," she said softly, setting the papers down, "these are the updated receipts and supplier schedules. I thought it might help." He looked up, catching her eyes for a moment longer than necessary. "You've done enough," he said, his voice steady but low. Her lips curved in a faint smile. "I like helping, I like feeling in control." He studied her, nodding the quiet strength that had always drawn him in. "You're incredible," he murmured, almost to himself. The words hung in the air, unspoken between them. She glanced at him, puzzled by the intensity in his eyes, but didn't comment. Instead, she gathered her things, prepared to leave when his hand caught hers. "Maya," he said, his tone sharp but gentle. She froze, meeting his gaze. I need you to be careful," he admitted. "The Harcourts, Damien," his jaw tightened, "they're dangerous, and now they know where you are." Her grip on her cane tightened. "I know, but I'm not leaving, not this time." He nodded slowly, but the tension in his chest only grew. This was no longer just about protection. Every day he spent watching her survive, fighting, refusing to break, it made the walls he had built around himself crumble. He couldn't ignore it any longer. That evening, the first signs of trouble began to surface in ways neither of them could ignore. The news channels had caught wind of a minor incident at Donovan Industries, a misreported financial discrepancy that Elijah knew was fabricated. His competitors smelled blood, hoping to leverage his distraction with Maya and the security threats into a scandal. Elijah's assistant burst into his office. "Sir, the media is running with the story. They're questioning your financials, the timing with the Silver Line incident. They're implying mismanagement." He didn't flinch. "Call our PR team. Shut it down before it gains traction." "But sir, it's already trending," the assistant said nervously. Elijah's jaw tightened. "Then we get ahead of it and tell them anyone who tries to threaten Maya will answer to me." Meanwhile, Maya was upstairs, unaware of the media storm swirling around her employer's name. She was practicing her exercises in the conservatory, each stretch and balance test a reminder of how far she had come. Yet even in her small victories, the memory of Damien and the threat he represented made her heart race. She paused, hand pressed to her chest. "I've survived before, I can survive again." And yet, for the first time, she wondered if this storm wasn't just physical or professional, it was emotional. She had come to care for Elijah in a way that frightened her. He wasn't just her protector anymore, he was becoming something she couldn't ignore. The first confrontation came that night. A loud knock at the estate gates jolted them both. Elijah was the first to react, moving swiftly to the security monitors. Through the night vision cameras, he spotted a sleek black SUV idling just beyond the gate. "Maya, stay here," he ordered, his voice low but firm. "Don't go alone," she said instinctively, stepping closer despite her cane. "I'm not going anywhere," he said sharply, eyes scanning the monitors. "Stay behind me." She nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Together they moved to the main hallway, their movements synchronized, him strong, commanding, her cautious but unbroken. Through the estate intercom, Elijah's security team confirmed the vehicle was stationary. Its occupants remained unidentified, but the intent was clear. They were testing boundaries, probing weaknesses. By morning, the tension had escalated. Reports of Elijah's competitors questioning his leadership were all over the news, accompanied by vague hints of a scandal involving Maya's past injuries. Maya read one headline, hands shaking: "Billionaire Donovan's employee controversy, accident or malpractice." Elijah saw her reaction. He crossed the room, placing a hand over hers. "Don't look," he said firmly. "They'll use anything to distract you, to frighten you. Ignore it." Her eyes met his wide with a mixture of fear and trust. I can't help it, they're twisting my past. You survived your past, he said softly, and we'll survive this together. I won't lose you, Maya, not now, not ever. Her breath caught at the intensity of his words. Something unspoken lingered between them, heavier than the threats outside, more consuming than fear, the realization that Elijah was no longer indifferent, that his walls, built from grief and loss, were cracking because of her. By the afternoon, Elijah had organized a meeting with his top security team. They were preparing for all contingencies: surveillance upgrades, perimeter fortifications, and contingency plans in case the Harcourts or their agents attempted intrusion. Maya observed quietly, leaning on her cane but fully engaged. I can help, she said. You've done enough, Elijah replied, but his gaze lingered on her in a way that betrayed more than authority. This is my fight. Your fight is healing, Maya. Everything else, leave it to me. Her lips pressed together. It's hard to just leave it. He took her hand, surprising her. Then let me be your strength. You've been carrying the past alone for too long. Her eyes glistened. She wanted to say more, to admit the depth of what she felt, but the words lodged in her throat. The next threat arrived in the form of a call. Damien Harcourt. Elijah answered before Maya could, his voice steady but cold. Donovan, Damien's voice was smooth, mocking. You've done well keeping her safe, but you can't shield her from everything forever. Try me, Elijah replied evenly. You've already crossed the line once. Don't test me again. Maya stood behind him, tense but silent. Damien chuckled. Oh, I'm not testing you yet, but don't forget, past debts have a way of coming due. The line went dead, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Elijah turned, his jaw clenched. He's escalating. Maya swallowed, her fingers tightening on her cane. We can handle it, she said, though her voice lacked certainty. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Not alone, we together. Her heart skipped, the weight of his declaration settling in a way she hadn't expected. That evening, Elijah found her in the garden again, practicing balancing exercises. The setting sun cast long shadows over the estate, and the air was thick with the scent of wet grass. You're pushing yourself too hard, he said quietly, stepping beside her. I have to, she admitted. If I don't, I'll always feel like I'm still that girl on the stairs, helpless, waiting for someone to save me. He watched her struggle for a moment, then took her hand. You don't have to be helpless anymore, not with me. Her eyes widened. Elijah. I mean it, he said, his voice low, firm, unwavering. I've spent years watching life slip away from me, watching people I care about disappear. I won't let that happen to you. Tears pricked at her eyes. I'm not sure I know how to do this, she whispered. He cupped her face gently. You don't have to, not alone, I'm here. The world around them, media, rivals, past threats, faded into insignificance. For the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to breathe, to feel, to hope. And Elijah, standing beside her, realized that protecting her wasn't just about defending her from external threats. It was about holding onto someone worth loving, someone who had reopened a heart he thought was forever frozen. Night fell over the estate. Rain began to patter softly against the windows, the sound familiar, soothing, yet ominous. Elijah sat in his study, planning, strategizing, but his thoughts kept returning to Maya. She entered quietly, carrying a blanket. You should rest, she said softly. He looked up, seeing her determination, her care, her resilience. I can't, he admitted. Not yet, not while the storm outside and in my life is still raging. She stepped closer. Then let me stay with you for a moment, just until the storm passes. He hesitated, then nodded. She sat beside him, her shoulder brushing against his, and in the quiet, amid papers and rain and looming threats, they found a fragile peace. A storm still raged, media scrutiny, rivals plotting, Damien Harcourt lurking, but for the first time, Elijah refused to walk away. Not from her, not from the life he was beginning to imagine together. He held her hand and she held his, both of them aware of the danger, yet daring to hope that together, they could withstand anything. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, two hearts braced for the tempest, unbroken and unwilling to let go. And for Elijah Donovan, one truth burned brighter than fear. This time, he would not lose someone he loved.